and WBT. Huh?
It's 5:05 a.m. and welcome to a Monday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good Monday morning to you. Our top story this morning, as you can imagine, continues to be recovery efforts and ongoing support missions that are taking place in the western half of our state this morning as the region grapples with Hurricane Helene's catastrophic destruction left in the mountain area of our state. With some areas receiving over 29 inches of rainfall, the storm, as of still this morning, many communities are completely isolated, islands sitting on their own, with major road closures, widespread power outages. Emergency teams, including swift water rescue units from multiple states, are still working to bring supplies to various areas and also conduct wellness checks and find individuals that are still missing. Over 100 people have already been rescued from floodwaters, and the death toll is expected to rise, unfortunately, as search and rescues in many areas have been cut off by floodwaters and mass sets of debris. Governor Roy Cooper, in a press conference yesterday afternoon, emphasized the unprecedented nature of this destruction, urging North Carolinians to avoid all non-essential travel in the western half of the state and get their latest update from local officials. Floodwaters have damaged critical infrastructure, including water systems, roads, communication networks, and in many places, electrical infrastructure is completely gone. The North Carolina Department of Transportation said that Interstate 40 was closed in multiple locations between Asheville and portions of eastern Tennessee due to washout and debris. And in Asheville this morning, nearly 100,000 residents are on the brink of not having access to water for weeks. That's according to a press release shared by the city on Sunday afternoon. According to the city's press release, it says, quote, extensive repairs are required to treatment facilities, underground and above ground water pipes, and the roads to them have washed away, which are preventing water personnel from accessing parts of the system. Although providing a precise timeline is impossible, it is important to note that restoring service to the entire full system could potentially take weeks. This is a developing situation, a developing story. We're tracking it over at carolinajournal.com. It's now 5:07 on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Continuing to track complete and total devastation out in the western half of North Carolina due to the impacts of hurricane and then tropical storm Helene. Carolina Journal's Donna King joins us this morning on the News Hour. Donna, these images and pictures that we've seen over the weekend, they're absolutely remarkable.
They really are. It is just devastating. I'm looking at a video where our family, of course, has vacationed and spent time at Montreat in Black Mountain and parts of Asheville in the Arts District. It is absolutely devastating. You know, as I talk to you, we've got family and friends group chats going crazy. People still trying to reach loved ones and family members, or students who are at Appalachian State, just assuring them that they're okay and on higher ground. This is an unbelievable, just surreal situation unfolding in western North Carolina.
Well, and one of the things that's really proven here, Donna, is how vitally important infrastructure is. And we've learned over the last couple of days, not only are the power grids completely knocked out, but the cell phone networks are down, commercial internet service is down in a lot of those areas, and folks are reverting back to amateur radio, ham radio, to get the message out. That's something that's, I think, very important to note.
It is. It really is important because they are going back to those basics like ham radio. We're also seeing people putting out on Twitter when they get just a flash of connectivity saying, hey, we've got 30 people on a roof in this county or this region or this area to call for help. Basic services are just not available. One of the really interesting kind of side notes I've seen unfolding right now is the Starlink system, Elon Musk's satellite internet connection. Folks who already may have had it there in western North Carolina in the mountains are putting it out, and it's working. I mean, you're seeing 911 operators and local sheriffs using neighbors' Starlink systems. They even have some reporters who are putting out their Starlink systems, and people are just lined up to try and get word out to their family members that they're okay. So it really is interesting to see what comes of that system as the waters recede.
Governor Roy Cooper, along emergency management officials, held a press conference yesterday afternoon. Donna, they're activating some folks from the National Guard. What are the details on that?
So what we're hearing now is that Governor Cooper has activated 500 soldiers and airmen from the North Carolina National Guard and about 200 vehicles and aircraft. But truthfully, the vehicles are not as important right now as that aircraft, because roads, if you look at the pictures of 40, just washed out, gone. These vehicles can't always traverse that kind of land. So these helicopters, even private helicopters, are getting in there to try and help out. There are rescue crews coming into North Carolina from Connecticut, Maryland, Ohio, Iowa, Florida, South Carolina, Pennsylvania. We've got groups coming in from all over the country to try and help Western North Carolina. They're saying like 115 air missions have already rescued just dozens of people, but that number is likely much higher.
Unfortunately, we have to talk about it, Donna, and this number is likely to grow as well. What is the death toll as of right now where we stand?
Buncombe County Sheriff Quentin Miller had a press conference on Sunday evening and said, unfortunately, that they've got more than 30 confirmed deaths from Helene, but they really anticipate that number to rise as the waters recede and they're able to get to these areas that have been cut off by mudslides. The mudslide videos that you may have seen online are just horrific, and that's what they're really concerned about. People are calling for help for their family members on social media and Facebook, only to later update followers that it's too late, that their loved ones had perished. So I think that they really are anticipating this number to grow.
And you mentioned those floodwaters starting to recede and civilization starting to move into those areas. Have we heard anything, whether it's from the governor or from local officials? Donna, how do we even begin on some of this restoration after complete and total devastation and destruction?
Oh, I mean, I think the first thing is government, but of course, government moving at the pace it does, there's no telling really, because we have these areas that are just disappeared. Areas around Lake Lure, Chimney Rock, they're just literally wiped from the map. It is a devastating situation. Right now, about 500,000 customers are without power. That's down from about 1 million. So they are trying to get help to these folks. The federal government has issued a federal major disaster declaration in 25 counties and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. That too might climb as well. And then, of course, the state legislature is keeping very close tabs on some of the districts out there. They're due to come back next week in October for a quick short session, but that may get stretched out if they need to approve spending for more recovery and opening roads and rebuilding from all this devastation.
I'm sure many folks this morning are wondering what they can do to help. There's a page set up on the John Locke website. Where do folks find details about that?
Absolutely. Head over to johnlocke.org and you can see help support Hurricane Helene relief efforts. There we've sort of assembled a list of trusted charities where that the money is going directly to help the folks who are really in harm's way right now. So from that page, there are clickable links to help out.
We're continuing to track the details. Donna, thank you. You can read more at carolinajournal.com. It's 5:13 on the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Let's get a look at the roads this morning. Boomer Von Cannon's got the latest on traffic.
Hey, thank you, Nick. And the university...
Stay connected. Pete Kaliner, today, noon to 3. WBT.
Your emergency situation station.
It's 5:19. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Also streaming live this morning on the Carolina Journal's YouTube channel. We are continuing to track complete and total devastation out in the western half of North Carolina this morning. As of yesterday, the North Carolina National Guard activated more than 500 soldiers, airmen, and more than 200 vehicles and aircrafts, including hoist and emergency aviation assets, as well as high water response vehicles. The North Carolina National Guard reported as of yesterday afternoon that it completed 16 air missions, resulting in the rescue of 119 individuals and 11 pets. In an update they put on their X account, they said, quote, "Our National Guard air assets have identified people on the ground and utilized social media and emergency calls to locate, identify, and evaluate citizens in western North Carolina. Our air assets have moved more than 34,000 pounds of cargo, including food, water, and medical supplies, to distribute. In the past 48 hours, we have also been augmented by personnel and air assets from Connecticut, Maryland, Ohio, Iowa, Florida, South Carolina, and Pennsylvania." The North Carolina National Guard said the largest single mission that they flew saw the rescue of 41 people north of Asheville in Buncombe County. Buncombe County is seen this morning as one of the hardest hit areas here across the state of North Carolina. The Black Mountain Police Department issued an alert on Sunday evening that the Bee Tree Dam that was at the potential brink of collapse was checked and it is clear. In a post on their Facebook page, they wrote, "We just received information from the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office that the Bee Tree Dam was checked again and it is safe. Please keep checking in for updates." Governor Roy Cooper, in a press conference yesterday afternoon, talked about the importance of the federal disaster and the federal aid that is coming in after this storm.
This declaration will immediately pave the way for public assistance to help our hard-hit local governments, as well as provide much-needed relief to our residents through the Individual Assistance Program, and people are already signing
up for that. The governor also talked about infrastructure.
Many people are cut off because roads are impassable. They don't have power or communications. Please know that we are sending resources and coordinating closely with local governments, first responders, state and federal partners, and volunteer organizations to help those impacted by this tragic storm.
That's Governor Roy Cooper yesterday at an emergency operations center press briefing. We'll continue to follow those details on the Carolina Journal News Hour. 522 News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Donna, turning our attention to the federal level, border security and immigration continues to be a top issue amongst voters. We saw that in the Carolina Journal poll just a couple of weeks ago. Congressman Dan Bishop, who's the Republican candidate for Attorney General, is making some noise in D.C.
Absolutely. So he joined Congressman Bishop, North Carolina, representing North Carolina, joined about 40 other lawmakers writing a letter to the Biden administration saying we want some accountability, that they believe that there has been a cover-up in how migrant children, unaccompanied minors, are placed with sponsors. They feel like there have been some shortcuts by the Biden administration in really vetting some of these folks to make sure that they are family members, that they don't have a criminal record, that these kids just aren't being trafficked. At one time, you may remember a year or so ago, we were hearing there were some 85,000 kids coming across the border that were unaccompanied and that they didn't know where they were, that they weren't tracked. There's some estimate now that that number may have reached 300,000. Even up into 340,000 children who they just don't know what happened to them. They're just not being tracked appropriately. And what they're asking for is for the Department of Homeland Security to get involved, because they say that Health and Human Services has cut corners and expedited the process. At one point, you had to have DNA matches to claim a child as a relative, and that perhaps some of those things are being left out of the process in order to process this many people coming across the border.
Are you shocked that a story of this magnitude has seemingly kind of fallen under the radar over the last couple of years? Donna, you would assume a story about potentially hundreds of thousands of misplaced or missing children would be the top of every newscast on every TV station and every newspaper across the country.
Nick, absolutely. I really am. I'm alarmed as a parent that this kind of thing has become politicized to a degree, because I think with the election coming up, that they're not taking it seriously. It feels to me as though it's not being taken seriously. When you have that many unaccompanied minors being just sort of dropped off with whomever, I feel like we're looking at a generational trauma issue that we have coming 10, 20 years from now. We're going to start hearing about these stories and say, what in the world? How did this happen? How did we let this happen as a society? But I think really in the end, we're going to be looking at the 2024 election as the reason why it does not feel like it's getting the press that it deserves.
Well, turning our attention to another late-breaking immigration story, Vice President Kamala Harris was at the border on Friday. We also learned from a new Immigrations and Customs Enforcement ICE report, Donna, that there are tens of thousands of illegal immigrants that have been screened by Customs and Border Protection. These individuals have lengthy criminal rap sheets, and they were just released into the country.
Yes, I mean, thousands and thousands of illegal immigrants convicted of murder, and 15,000 that have been sex offenders were allowed to move through. This report is coming from the Biden-Harris administration acting ICE director. He's issued this report saying that these numbers are pretty shocking, but they have 662,000 non-citizens with criminal histories on the docket, and those include some that were detained by ICE, but also of those 435,000 are convicted, and 226,000 have pending charges. So this is a very real issue. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who have been released into the United States with a criminal history, and most of them in violent crime. So it is alarming. The problem is that there are, folks who are not convicted criminals, but there are a lot who are, and we don't know who it is. They're not being tracked properly. It appears that they're not being tracked properly. And we have the people who know, those on the ground, folks who are with ICE, sounding the alarm, and it does. Again, in this case situation, it feels like that no one is listening.
Donna King from the Carolina Journal joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. We could have a pretty big story in southeastern North Carolina coming up tonight and into early parts of tomorrow, a potential big-time strike at the Port of Wilmington. But it's not just Wilmington. It's pretty much all ports on the East Coast and some ports in the Gulf Coast. Spells trouble for the supply chain.
It really does. Actually, that's another one. I mean, you think prices are pretty high now. Just wait. So at midnight on the 30th, we're looking at a potential strike of ports. Now, North Carolina is a right-to-work state, but because we have, the Longshoremen's Association, that union their contract expires, we may have North Carolina's ports shutting down as well. So Carolina Journal reporter Jeff Moore has called over to the ports and said, okay, what are you going to do if the Longshoremen Union goes on strike? And they said, we have a contingency plan. A contingency plan is to honor the work stoppage. And that is alarming because we have refrigerated, cool containers, things like that, groceries, store shelves, the medication, like everything you can think of comes into North Carolina's ports. And so if that stops, our supply chain is disrupted to a level that we may not have been able to see since COVID. So that supply chain really could see some disruption when you go to get your groceries later this week. And it is alarming to me that there wasn't a better plan in place should this happen. Port of Wilmington took in a lot of the work from the Baltimore port, if you remember when that bridge collapsed. So now there's even more goods coming in through Wilmington's port. So this is something we'll be watching closely throughout the day, and it is midnight on the 30th.
Donna King with the Carolina Journal joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. 529 News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Time to get another look at the roadways this morning. Boomer Von Cannon's got the latest.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Have an incident north.
WBT.com for details.
535 News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT, the Carolina Journal News Hour. I'm Nick Craig. Good Monday morning to you. Well, we continue to track this morning complete and total devastation in the western half of North Carolina as recovery operations are ongoing as of this hour. Some areas out to the west receiving over 29 inches of rain due to Hurricane Helene's catastrophic impacts felt across the region. The storm has left many communities isolated with major road closures and widespread power outages. As of this morning, taking a look at the power outages across the western half of North Carolina, there are still over 456,000 individuals in our state without power this morning. And hearing from crews in the area, they say it will take weeks, if not months, to restore electrical service to some remote customers. Emergency teams, including swift water rescue units from multiple states, are working to bring supplies to the affected areas. Over 119 people have already been rescued from floodwaters, and unfortunately the death toll sits at 33 in the state of North Carolina as of this morning. Governor Roy Cooper talked about the unprecedented nature of this disaster and urged North Carolinians to avoid all essential travel and to get their latest updates and news from local officials. Floodwaters, as we talked about, have damaged critical infrastructure, including water systems, roads, communication networks, and efforts to restore power to hundreds of thousands of homes is still ongoing. The North Carolina Department of Transportation reporting that I-40 is still closed in multiple locations between Asheville and eastern Tennessee due to washouts, debris, and landslides in various areas. Nearly 100,000 residents in Asheville could lose access to their water supply for weeks. That's according to the latest information shared by the city on Sunday afternoon. They wrote, extensive repairs are required to treatment facilities, underground and above ground water pipes, and the roads that have washed away, which are preventing water personnel from accessing critical parts of the system. Although providing a precise timeline is impossible, it is important to note that restoring service to the full system could potentially take weeks. That is. That's the latest coming in from the city officials in Asheville. We'll learn more details throughout the day today and keep up to date with those over at carolinajournal.com. U.S. East and Gulf Coast port workers are set to go on strike at midnight tonight, with no talks currently scheduled to head off a stoppage threatening to halt container traffic from Maine to Texas and could potentially cost the U.S. economy about $5 billion a day. The labor contract between the International Longshoremen's Association, which is a union that represents about 45,000 port workers, and the United States Maritime Alliance, which is an employer group, expires late today with negotiations at an impasse over pay. A port strike will go into effect starting tomorrow morning, Tuesday, at 12:01 a.m., according to the Longshoremen's Association. This is the first coast-wide strike since 1977, and the union said on Sunday that, well, this strike will continue as the groups refuse to address a half-century of wage issues. If union members do walk off the job, it would affect ports that handle about half of the nation's ocean shipping. As I mentioned, no negotiation talks are scheduled to take place today, and none are planned before the deadline. A person familiar with the matter said on the conditions of anonymity to Reuters. We'll continue to track that story as well. It's now 5:40 on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Turning our attention to the upcoming election, voter ID will be in effect, at least as of right now, across the state of North Carolina. And a story that we have been tracking over the last couple of weeks surrounds UNC Chapel Hill's digital identification system. And I've got an update for you this morning. The North Carolina Court of Appeals has ruled that the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's digital identification cards cannot be used as a voter ID in the upcoming election. A unanimous 3-judge appellate panel issued this ruling Friday afternoon. It's a temporary injunction and what is called a writ of supersedence. The writ blocks a lower court order that would have allowed state election officials to count the digital UNC ID as a valid form of voter identification. The appeals court ruled will keep the names of the 3 participating judges secret for 90 days. That 90-day timeline puts us well past the election window. The order reads as follows: the State Board of Elections is hereby enjoined from accepting the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill Mobile One card or any other image of a photo ID, either as a photocopy or a photo on a mobile device. That is prohibited by the State Board of Elections numbered memos 2023-03 for the purpose of casting a ballot in the November 2024 general election. The Republican National Committee and the North Carolina Republican Party filed a petition on September the 20th seeking the injunction to block an order from Wake County Superior Court Judge Keith Gregory. The State Board of Elections and the Democrat National Committee opposed the GOP group's request. Gregory ruled against the Republican organizations back on September the 19th, rejecting the request for a temporary restraining order, and he upheld the State Board of Elections' decision to allow UNC digital IDs to serve as a valid form of voter identification. The Republican groups wrote, quote, the UNC student or employee electronic photo ID is not one of the forms of photo identification that a registered voter may present when voting in person. That's according to North Carolina general statute, and is far less secure than the forms of permissible photo identification listed in the statute. The UNC student and employee electronic photo identification can be easily manipulated using publicly available mobile applications and is susceptible to being used to commit voter fraud. Looking at some of the other comments that came through, Gregory, who was the Wake County judge, issued his ruling after roughly 1 hour of arguments from lawyers on both sides of it. He did say, quote, am I supposed to make the assumption that these kids at Chapel Hill and these employees are trying to commit fraud? Well, he obviously did not believe that was the case, ruled against the RNC and the NCGOP. As I mentioned, that decision was appealed, and now a unanimous 3-judge appellate panel as of Friday afternoon has issued a new ruling. Not exactly sure what the next steps are for the North Carolina Board of Elections and the Democrat groups that were against this change. That is one of our top stories that we are tracking this morning over at carolinajournal.com. It's now 5:43, News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Let's get a look at your Monday morning commute. Boomer Von Cannon's got the latest in traffic.
Hey, thanks, Nick. Have an incident.
WBT.
Your emergency situation station.
550 News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT, the Carolina Journal News Hour, also streaming live this morning on the Carolina Journal YouTube page. We are continuing to track a dramatic imagery that pours in from western North Carolina. That region has been absolutely crippled by historic flooding as a result of the impacts of hurricane and then tropical storm Helene. There have been dozens of deaths related to Helene, over 33 being reported right now in North Carolina. And I say, unfortunately, this morning that number is likely to climb. In an update Sunday afternoon, the Buncombe County Sheriff said that 30 people had been confirmed dead throughout the county there, and the county has still more than 1,000 individuals that are missing, according to missing persons reports that have been filed online. There's hundreds of thousands of individuals without power, no water, no cell service. This is the reality for many of our friends living out in the western half of the state this morning. Residents are unable to contact loved ones or call for help, and flooding has left many roads impassable or just gone, trapping residents in the mountains. According to the latest data this morning, there are more than 457,000 customers in North Carolina without power. Chris Nault, who is a spokesperson for the North Carolina Electric Cooperative, said the impact of this storm is unprecedented, even historic. In Buncombe County, there are more than 90,000 customers without power. That's one of the hardest hit in our state. There are roughly 15,000 technicians and support personnel from 19 states as well as Canada that are working to try and restore power out west. State and local leaders said on Sunday that they'll focus on restoring powers to hospitals, schools, and other essential services first. The catastrophic damage in the mountain cities and towns, which some are comparing to that of Hurricane Katrina, has made restoration impacts incredibly difficult. Jeff Brooks with Duke Energy said in many areas of western North Carolina, especially in the higher elevations, access is extremely difficult. And one of the huge issues that's ongoing right now is the loss of water. We learned from city officials in Asheville yesterday that residents in that area, nearly 100,000 that get water from the city, well, they might be without water for weeks. They said in an announcement, extensive repairs are required to treatment facilities, underground and above ground water pipes, and roads to those water facilities have washed away, which obviously is not allowing water personnel to access those parts of the system. The officials noted, although providing a precise timeline is impossible, they note that restoring service to the full system could potentially take weeks. That has caused individuals, private aircrafts, and other folks to put together missions of delivering water, food, and supplies to some of the hardest hit individuals out west. Governor Roy Cooper and emergency management officials held a press conference yesterday to talk about some of this. Governor Cooper emphasizing the importance of the federal aid that is hopefully soon to roll into North Carolina.
This declaration will immediately pave the way for public assistance to help our hard-hit local governments, as well as provide much-needed relief to our residents through the Individual Assistance Program, and people are already signing
up for that program. The governor then talked about infrastructure.
Many people are cut off because roads are impassable. They don't have power or communications. Please know that we are sending resources and coordinating closely with local governments, first responders, state and federal partners, and volunteer organizations to help those impacted by this tragic storm.
That work does continue this morning as we talk about the roads and bridges and infrastructure that has been completely decimated to the west. That is leaving air travel is really one of the only ways to get supplies and individuals out of the area.
Yesterday, we began airlifting supplies, including food and water, into the region. A number of mass feeding sites have been opened. Water, food, and other supplies are coming into Asheville, and they're also being airlifted from there to surrounding counties.
Those surrounding counties, some of the hardest hit in our state. And one of the big issues has been getting information from the West with the power outages and the infrastructure being completely decimated. Cell phone service is out, and really one of the only shining lights in all of this has been ham radio operators and Elon Musk's Starlink internet service. Governor Cooper talked about the communication infrastructure to the West.
Cell phone providers are working to fix the damage and get stopgap solutions in place, and rapid progress is being made. Restoring communications is critical to saving lives, finding out where people are, and getting in supplies. And I've been in constant contact with cell phone companies, urging action and offering them support.
Governor offering that support from the statewide level. It is honestly the unbelievable situation that is unfolding out west. We'll continue to track those details throughout the day over at CarolinaJournal.com. Another story that we are tracking this morning, well, it could have make some big-time impacts on the supply chain. Individuals on the U.S. East and Gulf Coast port workers are set to go on strike at midnight tonight, with no talks being currently scheduled to head off a stoppage that is threatening to halt container traffic from Maine to Texas. Estimates that could cost the U.S. economy upwards of $5 billion a day. The labor contract between the International Longshoremen's Association, which is a union that represents about 45,000 port workers, and the United States Maritime Alliance employer group, is set to expire tonight at midnight. Those negotiations are at an impasse over pay. A port strike will go into effect starting at 12:01 a.m. tomorrow morning, according to the Longshoremen's Association. The United States Maritime Alliance said, quote, refuses to address a half a century of wage subjugation is why we're looking at a strike, the union said in a statement. If union members do walk off the job, it would be the first coast-wide strike since 1977 from the Longshoremen's Association, affecting ports that handle about half of the nation's ocean shipping. No negotiations are scheduled to take place today. There are no meetings scheduled. We'll continue to track that story, plus the impacts out at the West. We'll have all of that coming up for you tomorrow morning right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. Thanks for spending some time with us. We're back tomorrow morning, starting at 5.